Hello and welcome to Unit 1, Concept 2, Lesson 3. Again, you should be working on your guided notes as you go. So, today, scholars will use mathematical properties to rewrite equations until the solution is found. Make sure you get that all filled in on your notes. So, let's talk about what happens if we do different things to these equations, to this equation, So hopefully we can agree that 7 times 4 would give us 28. And we also know that 14 times 2 would also give us 28. So when we start, this equation is very balanced. Okay? What happens if I decide to add 3 to both sides? So I'm going to take this equation, 7 times 4, and I'm going to add 3. And on this side, I'll do the same thing. Well, if we follow our order of operations, we're still going to do the multiplication first. So I've got 7 times 4 is 28, and that is going to bring down my plus 3. 14 times 2 is still 28. Bring down my plus 3 there. If I add 3 to the left side, I get 31. If I add 3 to the right side, I get 31. I'm still balanced. So let's talk about what happens if instead of adding, I decide to subtract. So in this case, I could take 7 times 4, and I'm going to subtract 5. And the same thing on the other side. 14 times 2, and I subtract 5. So as I keep on going through this problem, I get 28 minus 5 equals 28 minus 5. And that gives me 23 on the left and 23 on the right. So when I subtracted the same thing, again, I am still balanced. Well, what if instead of adding or subtracting, I decide I want to multiply? So in this case, I could take 7 times 4. And I want to multiply that whole thing times 2. The same thing on the other side. 14 times 2. And all I'm doing here, I'm using brackets just so you can see where I have parentheses. So remember, we start with our innermost parentheses. So 7 times 4 gives me 28. And I still have that in brackets, or I can change the parentheses I want. Take the other side, I got 14 times 2 still gives me 28. Now multiply times 2, which gives me 56, which equals 56. So again, I am still balanced. So one more case. What happens if instead of adding, I want to divide? So I'm going to take 7 times 4 and divide it by 2. And the same thing on the other side, 14 times 2 and divide it by 2. So 7 times 4 is still 28 divided by 2 equals 14 times 2 is still 28 divided by 2. I still end up with 14 on each side, so I am still balanced. So what we just saw was a demonstration of these mathematical properties. So the addition property of equality and the subtraction property of equality, and I do abbreviate those. Usually I use APE and SPE. They say if I add or subtract the same number from each side of an equation, the equation remains balanced. Remember, all of our equations are just balancing acts. So make sure that you get this on your guided notes. So if I add or subtract the same number from each side of an equation, that equation remains balanced. Very important thing we need to know. Same thing, the multiplication property of equality, MPE, and the division property of equality, DPE, tell us if I multiply or divide both sides of the equation by the same number, the equation remains balanced. We're going to be using these math properties to solve some problems. So how could I use that? Well, let's look real quick at this equation. So, first thing I want to do is remember we can combine some terms here, right? So I'm going to do that. Say I've got negative 20 still going to come down. I'm going to combine like terms. Negative 4x minus 6x gives me negative 10x. And what did I do here? What lets me do that? I can combine like terms. Well, what am I going to do next? Well, I want to get x by itself. I want x by itself. So I'm going to get rid of this negative 10. How am I going to do that? I'm going to get rid of the negative 10 by dividing by it because it's multiplying with my x. So I have negative 20 divided by negative 10 equals negative 10x divided by negative 10. So when I look at this, I say my negative 20 divided by negative 10 gives me 2, because a negative divided by a negative is a positive. And negative 10x divided by negative 10, any number that I multiply and then divide by the same number is going to turn into 1. So it becomes simply x. So here's my value for x. That was it. So let's try a different one. Here's another equation. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to combine like terms. 6 equals 1 minus... And of course, I started... So I'm going to combine my like terms, which are, in this case, my 1 and my 5. So this turns into 6 equals 6 minus 2n. And when I combined like terms, I just write CLT for that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 6 from both sides. 6 minus 6 equals 6 minus 6 minus 2n. And remember, this is my subtraction property of equality. So then I look at this. This right here, 6 minus 6 becomes 0. And right here, 6 minus 6 also becomes 0. I just don't write it. And so I have 0 equals negative 2n. But I don't want to know, and once again, I can combine like terms. I don't want to know what negative 2n equals. I want to know what n equals. So now I'm going to divide both sides by negative 2. And so I will simply end up with 0 equals n. What I did here was our division property of equality. And I got n equals 0. So let's look at this last slide. It gets a little bit more interesting. Well, notice here, I have something going on here. I could use my distributive property. So, first thing I would do is use my distributive property. So I write 5n plus 34 equals negative 2 times 1 gives me negative 2. Make sure that looks like a negative. Negative 2 times negative 7n gives me positive 14n. And this is my distributive property, dist prop, which you remember from last year. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to subtract 5n from both sides. Remember, I can subtract by variables just like I can by numbers. So I have 5n minus 5n plus 34 equals negative 2 plus 14n minus 5n. And this is my subtraction property of equality. So when I combine my like terms, this goes away, and these will combine also. But on this side, I end up with 34 equals negative 2 plus 9n. Now, that was by combining like terms. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add 2 to both sides. So I end up with 34 plus 2 equals negative 2 plus 2 plus 9n. Plus 9n. And that is my addition property of equality. So I'm going to combine my like terms, and I end up with 36. I went the wrong direction of that. 36 equals 9n. Next, I'm going to use my division property of equality. I combine like terms. So I have 36 divided by 9 equals 9n divided by 9. And that, I was bringing that up over here for a second, gives me 4 equals n.